Hello and welcome to Revolution Health. This is Dr. Jason Dean, and I am actually here with, this is my nerdy self talking. I'm here with a really cool fellow colleague and nerd, as I call all of us, who understand the science behind natural healthcare and what's actually going on. And I am with Dr. Stephanie Seneff, who is phenomenal. She's an MIT researcher. She knows her stuff. So Dr. Seneff, thank you and welcome to being on Revolution Health this morning.
Delighted to be here. Thank you.
She is a wealth of knowledge. We're going to talk about some things today that are, let's say, a little controversial, but the woman has done her homework and she has found out one of the major things behind, obviously, a lot of sickness in America, specifically America, across the world, and why this is actually happening. And the uncovered word that some companies out there, that I'm sure we'll drop your name at some point today, are using against the population, essentially. But we're going to talk about glyphosate first off today. And I know a lot of people know Roundup, Monsanto, which is now Bayer because they very effectively took away the Monsanto name, or they're in the works doing it. And it's going to be Bayer Pharmaceutical Company now that's running this. But you have been working with, how long have you been working with glyphosate now and looking into this?
It's only been about 5 or 6 years. And it's interesting because I started maybe 10 or 12 years ago looking at autism, wanting to figure out what it was that was causing the autism epidemic. And it took me 5 years of searching before I stumbled upon glyphosate, quite by accident, serendipity, because I happened to hear a talk by Professor Don Huber, who is an expert on glyphosate. And he really, he hit a home run because he was filling in all the blanks of the missing pieces of what I was seeing in autism. It was like, wow, this is it. It was a total epiphany for me, a 2-hour presentation by Professor Don Huber. He's my personal hero. He's 80 years old, over 80 years old, and still going strong, giving talks all around the world, telling people, you got to watch out for this stuff. It is toxic. So once I dug into that, I stopped everything else that I didn't completely stop, but I spent most of my time on glyphosate after that talk. I've just basically dived in and I started reading all these articles about glyphosate and then about chemistry, biochemistry, biophysics to connect the dots. And it was like, oh my God, it's much worse than autism. That was my realization. And now I'm just trying to tell everybody who's willing to listen, you got to watch out with this chemical. It is toxic.
Absolutely. And not only, you dove in from an autism angle because you were personally a bit, connected to that, obviously.
Yes.
But then you saw that not only just autism, because that's the most skyrocketing thing we have right now from a, here and now, but you also saw it across the spectrum of other diseases as well. And gut comes into that. So now I'm going to tell you, she loves her science. She dives deep into it. So Google search while you're listening to this if you're watching it live. But take me into a little bit of the gut bacteria. We know that's a hot topic today.
Yes.
And how you discovered these broad spectrum diseases, not just autism, and why and how it was affecting the gut.
Yeah, it's amazing. And of course, I've become somewhat of an expert on the gut at this point because there are a lot of papers out there and there's a lot of new research. People are finally realizing the gut is the centerpiece of the problem that's causing all kinds of diseases, rheumatoid arthritis, ALS, autism, all these diseases start in the gut. And the gut microbes really have to be correctly balanced for you to have good health. Once they get messed up, things go south. And it's particularly glyphosate preferentially kills beneficial bacteria. There's bifidobacteria, there's lactobacillus. I mean, these are really important bacteria that are supposed to, when you start drinking milk, lactobacillus are very happy. They thrive on milk as baby, and they'll chase out the pathogens because they'll be able to flourish. But when you've got the glyphosate poisoning, they get killed. And the bifidobacteria get killed. And then you have this overgrowth of pathogens like C. difficile, and you get inflammatory gut, you get leaky gut. I mean, glyphosate actually causes a leaky gut through other mechanisms I'm discovering. And I've been talking to Zach Bush. I don't know if you've had the chance to interview Zach Bush, but you should.
I haven't talked to him yet, but he's on the list.
He's on the list. Yeah, I really hope he'll interview you because he's really caught on to the whole glyphosate leaky gut link, which is not just the bacteria. It's because it disrupts the digestion of proteins, and the proteins then irritate the gut, and the gut opens up the barrier it also causes paralysis. There was a case of a woman who tried to kill herself by drinking Roundup and almost succeeded. I mean, she survived. But one of the symptoms that the researchers observed in the paper they wrote in the case study was that it paralyzed her gut. And so when you have less glyphosate, it doesn't totally paralyze it, but it causes constipation. And then when you have constipation, you get a backup of the feces. You get SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, because everything's stagnant. And so you just have a ton of problems. It also disrupts the production of bile acids, which interferes with the digestion of fat. It messes up the proteins that are involved with digesting proteins. So the enzymes, like lipase digests fats, and then trypsin and pepsin digest proteins. And all three of them, Anthony Samso just ordered them from a lab, from a pig, porcine enzymes. And people are taking these enzymes. And they were loaded with glyphosate. He tested them for glyphosate, and all three of them came out with high levels of glyphosate contamination. So it's getting into those proteins and messing them up, preventing them from working correctly.
It's essentially a systemic destruction. I mean, from a physiological
It is. It's just awful what it does to the gut. And then it heads over to the liver and kills it too. I mean, there's all kinds of papers that talk about liver disease connected to glyphosate with rat studies, various studies on various animal models, lots of papers, and show all this disruption of the liver. And one of the things is the bile acids. It reduces the liver's ability to make bile acids. And that's really important because the bile acids they do a lot more than just digest fats, it turns out. And I've been reading all about the bile acids too. So it's just fascinating. The gut is intricately designed and works very, very well if you're not poisoning it every day. But when you have a low dose glyphosate, hitting the gut every day in your food, things are going to get bad. And you're going to then have all kinds of other diseases once things start leaking out of the gut. The bacteria leak out, you get autoimmune disease because the immune system goes on fire trying to keep in check all these things that are, leaking from the gut into the general system. That is not supposed to happen.
And now I watched an interview with you with Jeffrey Smith, and you were talking about the gut bacteria, and basically, and even numbers that I didn't know was the gut bacteria outnumber essentially the cells of the human body 10-1.
Yes, that's right. And their collective genome outnumbers our genome at least 100-1, probably more.
Wow.
When you take the genetic information,
your gut, this is going right to your gut bacteria, which is killing that balance.
Yeah, and they just do so many things for us. It's becoming more and more clear in the research, and certainly to me, all the things that we take for granted because they do them for us. And one of them is to produce the aromatic amino acids. We can't make aromatic amino acids, and those are essential building blocks of proteins: tryptophan, tyrosine, and phenylalanine. The pathway that makes those amino acids is disrupted by glyphosate. It's well known. Monsanto admits it. They say that's the way it kills the plant. It keeps the plant from being able to make those crucial nutrients. Well, guess what? The microbes make those things too, and our cells can't. They say, well, we don't have that pathway, therefore glyphosate's safe. We don't have to worry about it. But the fact is, our gut microbes have that pathway. They use it to make those essential molecules. We can't make them, so we depend upon the gut microbes to provide them for us. And they get, broken. They can't do it. And so we get deficiencies in those critical amino acids. And they're precursors to all kinds of incredible things, all the neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, melatonin, the sleep hormone, thyroid hormone, vitamin B, various vitamin B vitamins, but folate in particular. All of those are going to get disrupted by disruption of this pathway in the microbes, then they can't make those things for us as efficiently as they would without the glyphosate.
Now, if we go back to, and I'm a chiropractor by trade, so at the end of the day, I'm looking at brain, spinal cord, all this neurological tissue. And upon conception, you have to have certain things in place. You're developing literally an immune system, which is the nervous system, and a neural tube. Now, how is this affecting the glyphosate? How is it affecting this from a very early age? Because not only, and we'll talk a little bit about the vaccine aspect and what's in those, but how is this now, you guys said low dose of glyphosate, this is now hitting the kid, a newborn being created.
Yes.
And what do you know about that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely getting into the fetus during development. If the mother's exposed, it's going to get past the placenta. And in fact, once you get leaky gut barrier, all the other barriers become leaky as well. You get leaky brain barrier, you get leaky placental barrier, and things get into places where they shouldn't, bad things. And in fact, glyphosate, I believe glyphosate is causing toxic metals to be much more toxic than they would otherwise be. And I've written papers about that. Very interesting, for example, with respect to aluminum, because glyphosate is a chelator, a metal chelator, and it binds aluminum. And two glyphosate molecules will surround an aluminum atom. Aluminum has a +3 charge, and which keeps it from getting past the barrier. But the glyphosate atom molecules surround it and make it a neutral molecule. And then it can get past a leaky barrier very, very easily. So glyphosate first makes the barrier leaky and then takes the aluminum across that leaky barrier, carries it to the brainstem, and then unloads it in the acidic environment. So when it becomes acidic, glyphosate lets go. And now it has essentially delivered aluminum to the pineal gland, is what I think. And I've written a whole paper about this, how, and you see pineal gland being disrupted by aluminum, which then causes sleep disorder. And we have an epidemic in sleep disorder that is going up dramatically in step with a dramatic rise in the use of glyphosate on core crops. So I should say glyphosate is the one chemical in agriculture that matches. When you look at the usage of the different chemicals in agriculture over time, only glyphosate stands out as being the one that has been going up dramatically, exponentially, actually, for the past 20 years, particularly since the late 1990s when they introduced the GMO Roundup Ready crops. And they're pouring it on wheat right before the harvest as well. They're using it to kill the wheat right before harvest, which means it's getting into bread. And we have an epidemic in gluten intolerance, which matches the use of glyphosate on wheat. So you can look at all these, graphs of different and correlate them, and you just find a tremendously amazing match, between autism and the use of glyphosate on core crops, between celiac disease and the use of glyphosate on wheat, between Alzheimer's and the use of glyphosate on core crops. All these perfect match correlations. And of course, there's a big chatter. Correlation doesn't mean causation. People are kind of screaming that at us. But, I say back, tell me what else, because really glyphosate stands out. In agriculture, you can't find another chemical that is going to match anywhere near as well as glyphosate on the rise. And then you have to say also, why are all these diseases rising? There has to be a reason. So if it's not glyphosate, what is it?
You're essentially talking about, almost in a mad scientist evil way, the most genius toxin they may have created because of how much it unsettles in the human body.
I know. And in fact, I don't know if you're aware, but my most recent, since about December 2015, I think, was when Anthony Samsel I can remember so clearly this phone call where he said, I think glyphosate's getting into proteins by mistake in place of glycine. And I was like, wow, Anthony, do you think so? I don't think that's possible. My first reaction was, no, get out of here. It's not true, And that is everybody's first reaction. They're like, no, this can't happen. But then he said, no, take a look. It really makes a lot of sense. And so I did. And I started. And then I remember that winter because I was in Kauai. I'm lucky to have a second home in Kauai. So we escaped there in the winter. And I was in Kauai in December. And we had that phone call. I got off the phone and I started reading all about amino acid, non-coding amino acid substitution of coding amino acids. And it turns out there's a whole space. And there are multiple, maybe back off, glyphosate is a glycine molecule. It's an amino acid. It has extra stuff on its nitrogen, attached to its nitrogen. So it's a very simple molecule, actually. And its way of disrupting your chemistry is slow, insidious, and cumulative. And the reason is because it goes, I believe this. Now, this hasn't been proven, but the evidence is so overwhelming, in my view, that it's almost done deal. People are saying it's impossible. We have a sort of it's a very controversial topic. They have me and Anthony who are saying, this is happening, guys, wake up. And then we have the rest of the world saying, no, it's not possible. And so it's quite interesting. But there's a ton of evidence, even from Monsanto's own studies, even from the very enzyme that it disrupts in the shikimate pathway, which is the pathway that produces the aromatics. The way that it disrupts that enzyme can be perfectly explained through substitution of glycine in that enzyme at a critical place. It's quite amazing.
Wow.
And so, that happens, with other non-coding amino acids are actually produced by plants as a toxin to help to protect them from predators and whatnot. So plants can produce these unusual amino acids that substitute for coding amino acids by mistake. And that messes up the way the protein works, But the glyphosate is a synthetic molecule. It's not produced in nature. And it is terrifying when you start looking at all the roles of glycine in all the proteins, which is really a fun game to play. And anybody can play this game. Just start searching the web for papers that talk about glycine mutations. Like there's a protein and a glycine was mutated to something else in a genetic code. Somebody has a really severe disease in some cases because of one glycine getting substituted for something else. So it can be devastating in some proteins, in some places. That's the thing. It's a crapshoot, right? Glyphosate is just throwing itself into all these proteins in all these various ways. And a lot of them limp along, they do okay. It doesn't really destroy them. But then here and there, there's a hit where it's just absolutely catastrophic. And eventually you pile up these misfolded proteins, things like amyloid beta plaque. You can totally explain this. You can explain Alzheimer's by substituting specific glycines in the amyloid beta plaque and causing it to misfold, causing it to form insoluble fibrils and creating that plaque that's characteristic of Alzheimer's.
Wow. And now I know firsthand from seeing patients that we have in the media, powers that be will tell you that this mineral is abundant, but from a sulfur standpoint,
right?
How is glyphosate affecting that? Because we're seeing it, even though they claim that you'll never have to worry about it because there's plenty and you have no problems.
That's very interesting.
What have you seen? Because you know this specific connection between glyphosate and sulfur.
I certainly do. And it is a very complicated story with sulfur. There's many pieces to the puzzle, and glyphosate disrupts so many aspects of sulfur management. It's quite amazing. And I'm still finding more every day. One very interesting thing is taurine. And I don't know if you know about taurine supplements, for example. And taurine it gets stored in the brain and the heart and the liver in large amounts. It's a non-coding amino acid. It is an amino acid, but it doesn't go into the protein. So it's quite an unusual one. And it contains sulfur. And it contains sulfur that could become sulfate if you could break it down. But our cells can't break it down. So we just store it. We pile it in the brain, we pile it in the heart. When you have a heart attack, the heart releases taurine. When you have seizures, the brain releases taurine. It's very, very interesting. So the taurine is circulating in the blood, gets picked up by the liver, gets conjugated with the bile acids and shipped over to the gut. And the gut microbes say, oh, great, thank you very much for setting up this taurine molecule so beautifully with the bile acids that I can now turn it into sulfate. So that it's a way to recover sulfate in a crisis when there's too little sulfate. I think this intense event that's like a crisis with a heart attack or seizures, your body is desperately trying to get the gut microbes to make some more sulfate for you because you desperately need it. That's what I think. So glyphosate disrupts taurine in E. coli. There was a wonderful study in E. coli, and they had all these enzymes that were suppressed by glyphosate. And the most suppressed enzyme of all was a taurine transporter. So the E. coli couldn't get the taurine to come in, and therefore it couldn't turn it into sulfate. So this is just one example, the taurine. Methionine is also a problem. Methionine is a sulfur-containing amino acid. And we can't make methionine. We have to depend on the gut microbes to do that for us. It's been shown in studies on plants that glyphosate not only disrupts the aromatic amino acids, but also interferes with the synthesis of methionine. And in E. coli, again, there are enzymes that are suppressed by glyphosate that are used to make methionine from sulfate and from sulfite. So what's happening then is that sulfite is becoming toxic. So a lot of people have sulfur sensitivities. Like they can't eat things that contain sulfites, like dried fruit or wine. And so, and that's because the enzymes that either turn sulfite into sulfate or turn sulfite into methionine are busted by glyphosate. And therefore, sulfite is extremely toxic by itself. And you're left with an overgrowth of bacteria that can make hydrogen sulfide gas out of sulfite. And so you get desulfovibrio overgrowth, you get gas pains, you get hydrogen sulfide toxicity so both the sulfite and the hydrogen sulfide become toxic if you eat the foods that contain the sulfites and other sulfur-containing foods. And instead, what you want to do is make methionine or sulfate, but you can't do that because the glyphosate has messed up the microbes. So again, it's the microbes that are being messed up. And the consequences are that you've got a bellyache when you eat anything that contains sulfur. And it can cause brain problems too, because hydrogen sulfide gas can go to the brain, the sulfite can go to the brain, and they become toxic in the brain. Hydrogen sulfide is a gas, so it can go anywhere. Once it's produced, it can make its way to the brain and cause, brain fog and things like that. So I get lots of email from people who say, I can't eat sulfur-containing foods. And at first I was really puzzled by it, so I had to keep, digging around to figure out the story. But that's what I think is going on. The taurine is busted, the methionine is busted, the sulfate is busted, sulfite and hydrogen sulfide gas become toxic.
Yeah, and I think the majority of our country at this point, and I know you've said in other interviews how America, we go extreme in every direction we do things.
Yes.
We basically consume the most glyphosate.
We do.
We are technically the sickest country, and also we probably the most digestive issues of any population on the planet. And obviously you found that there's only one chemical that continues to be made in abundance and sprayed on everything.
Yeah, and we're still saying it's perfectly safe. And there's such a disconnect because we've been so well trained that this chemical is safe, and people have gotten very used to going down and getting Roundup and killing the dandelions in their yard. People think it's non-toxic. It's for me, it was hard. Oh my God, I didn't think of Roundup at all. I was looking at everything I could think of to try to explain autism, and I didn't think of Roundup because Roundup's safe. Everybody thinks it's safe, and it's a big fat lie. Monsanto basically got through the review process through corruption. And Anthony Samsel, he's been working with me. We've published several papers together. He's a really interesting person, by the way. He's another one you might want to interview.
I got all the names now.
Yeah. He's definitely controversial, and he's so passionate and so confident. And he's a chemist. He was an Arthur D. Little. He was a member of an Arthur D. Little think tank for his entire career. He's now retired, and he still works for Arthur D. Little as a consultant, and he does consultancy on toxic waste sites and things like that. He's a really good chemist. He has a lot of patents, very good intuition about chemistry. So he's the one who said it's getting into the proteins,
Right.
And it works so well. It was just like, oh my God, this explains all these correlations. I can take each one of those diseases and I can deep dive, and I've done gout, I've done anencephaly, which is a baby born with no brain. Mm-hmm. I've done ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. I'm working right now on keratoconus, which is a sort of problem with the eyes. It's turning out to be an epidemic, and it has to do with collagen, not working correctly in the eyes, in the cornea. And keratoconus is connected with all kinds of autoimmune diseases, it turns out, and all of them are connected to glyphosate. So glyphosate causes all of these things. So when you have keratoconus, it's an indicator that you've got glyphosate poisoning, and you probably have something else as well, like rheumatoid arthritis, or just various other asthma, eczema, and all these kinds of autoimmune conditions that are being caused by, I think, proteins that have misfolded. Either our proteins, because they're contaminated with glyphosate, they misfold, they cause an immune reaction, or we're getting bacterial proteins that are getting a glyphosate contamination, making them much more allergenic. We're getting food proteins like gluten, contaminated with glyphosate, much more allergenic. So we're getting our immune system's on fire, creating all these antibodies that then attack our own tissues through molecular mimicry. And that's how you get multiple sclerosis. It's just, and probably lupus, all these things are being caused by this autoimmune epidemic that we're seeing.
Yeah, and that's what it is. Autoimmune is just skyrocketing. It makes sense because you're finding this one specific thing that actually ties to it. And again, no one wants to look at it. And now we talked about autism, but you're also finding the vaccine link with glyphosate. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that's Anthony Samsel, and also Zen Honeycutt of Moms Across America. And I actually tipped her off on that. I said, it's possible that glyphosate's getting in the vaccines, because they're grown on, especially the live virus vaccines, because when you think about how they're made, and I'm starting to realize that there's probably glyphosate contamination in many drugs and many supplements as well. I'm starting to really be concerned about that. But vaccines, the live virus vaccines, are grown on a culture that is gelatin derived from the bones and ligaments of cows and pigs that are fed heavy doses of glyphosate in their feed. And collagen, which is the gelatin comes from collagen. Collagen is the most common protein in the body by far. Like a third of the proteins in the body are collagen molecules. That's all the glue in the joints and everything. And collagen itself has tons of glycine. Like 25% of the amino acids in collagen are glycines. It has this pattern, GXY, 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 where every third amino acid is glycine. And it needs that pattern to form its triple helix matrix, beautiful structure that gives your joints the right kind of flexibility and strength and able to hold water, all these properties of collagen. The glycine is crucial for that. So we're getting, glyphosate thrown into collagen in our joints, which is causing our joints to be sick. So we're getting all kinds of issues with back pain and shoulder pain and knee pain and foot pain. I mean, people are just getting neck pain, right? They've just got so many problems with their joints. I think because the glyphosate is messing up the collagen. That's one of the key reasons. But that collagen then becomes gelatin in the food that's supplied for the live virus in the vaccine. So the measles virus is grown in a culture on gelatin, also on fetal bovine serum, which is from the calf, the fetus, of the cow that's fed lots of glyphosate. So that's going to have glyphosate too. And then the virus is just going to incorporate the glyphosate into its own proteins. And it turns out that the measles virus produces a protein called hemagglutinin that contains glycine in a particular sequence that matches a sequence in the myelin basic protein in the myelin sheath. So what's happening is with these autistic kids, I believe, that are getting autism following MMR. I mean, that's another very controversial topic, but I absolutely have seen so many cases of dramatic examples where the child is fine, they get the MMR vaccine, they have a nasty reaction, and then they regress into autism. Many, many parents have that story about their children. And the MMR contains the hemagglutinin, which is the actual protein that you need to react to in order for the vaccine to take. So the whole point of the vaccine is to get your immune cells to develop antibodies to hemagglutinin from the measles. And that way you will protect yourself from measles. But that it contains a peptide sequence that resembles a peptide sequence in myelin basic protein. And if you've got the leaky barriers, the virus gets into the brain. The brain's immune system reacts, and then you produce autoantibodies to the myelin sheath, and you attack the myelin sheath, and then you get into trouble with the brain. And this was actually an explanation that was proposed for MMR and autism by a group of researchers at Utah State University. I was so surprised when I found that. I got to it by this very circuitous route because I was looking at the glyphosate, looking at the hemagglutinin, realizing that it had this in it, and then to go to the web and see if I can find something. This is sort of the game I play, right? And I came up with these papers going back to the 1990s by this group. The lead author is Singh, professor at Utah State. And they proposed that MMR was causing autism through this mechanism of the hemagglutinin, molecular mimicry, autoimmune disease attacking the myelin sheath. And it's really, I think, a very strong story. And it really makes sense if the hemagglutinin has glyphosate in it. It really brings it home.
Wow. And it's interesting. Someone commented here saying that when glyphosate came out, that's actually when eczema started in 1995. And
yeah, that's interesting.
You might have an outburst of that as well.
We certainly do. Yeah. In fact, I have grandchildren who are suffering from eczema, so I know that problem well.
Yeah. And now on top of that too is, and this is just from a personal experience within my office and seeing a lot of people, is now we know that glyphosate is affecting the gut bacteria tremendously. And now we have also, and I don't know if everyone understands totally how it works. You may see a little bit of this as well, but an epidemic from an immune challenge standpoint, whether it's a fungus, a bacteria, or even the parasitic issue. Yes. Parasites are going crazy now within the human body. And I'm wondering if this isn't affecting things to the point that the gut bacteria is just so out of control that these different immune challenges are able to just proliferate with nothing holding them back.
Yes, I think so. And in fact, I wonder whether the parasites are actually doing a service to sort of soak up all the toxins that are not being properly cleared, because, glyphosate messes up the liver's cytochrome P450 enzymes. And those are crucial for detoxing a lot of the other chemicals that we're exposed to. And I think that the parasites may be able to sort of harbor, pull in various toxins. They may be actually doing the service for us. They're growing in the gut, and they're trying to keep these toxins from getting into your general circulation by holding on to them. And then eventually they go out through the feces, but they hang around for a long time, gathering stuff to try to protect you from collateral damage over your whole circulation by keeping it in the gut.
Sure. My concern is that then they give off more toxicity because
I know.
Sitting there,
That's right. And they produce toxic products. And that's
right.
true for the C. difficile as well. They produce interesting toxic products that, again, can cause autism. And that's some interesting work being done by William Shaw. He has a wonderful paper, a very sad paper on triplets. It's one of the few papers, it might be the only paper I have that actually, from somebody else besides my group of people, proposing a link between glyphosate and autism, because these triplets were all, they all tested high for glyphosate in the urine. Two of them, the two boys had autism, the girl had a seizure disorder, and they had a C. difficile overgrowth in their gut. He confirmed that. And he suspected that it was messing up dopamine and causing neurotoxicity from an inability to metabolize dopamine due to a metabolite that's released by the C. difficile. So very interesting, all these intricacies of all these complex interactions among microbes and human cells and chemicals, just causing a total mess. So many different ways. It's quite amazing.
If you can mess up the gut, then you can control the entire body, which also takes over the brain. And that's why the skyrocketing of everything from digestive issues to, honestly, even mental health issues. I mean,
I know. Yes.
It's all connected. And you're the only one, one of the only ones putting this all together.
That's why I keep on doing things like this, because I want the message to get out. And I hope that anybody listening to this or hearing it later will catch on and help to spread the word, because we need to get this message out. And I think, switching to an organic diet is super important. If for one reason, just to encourage the farmers to grow organic food, because we need to get the glyphosate, we need to get the factories shut down. And legislation is a very difficult path. The government is so thoroughly bought, it's extremely discouraging. But we can do it grassroots, bottom up. And so I like to tell people, choose organic when you buy at the grocery store. It will help you to reduce your own glyphosate burden, and it will encourage the farmers to grow organic. If we don't buy the toxic food, they won't make it. We have the control with our pocketbook.
And I think we're heading into, I think you even said this one time, some colleagues went to one of your seminars, and basically you have to go fully organic. I mean, it's not we all know that there's a more of a cost there, but at the same time, we also know what disease costs at this point. And
yeah.
no one can claim that the disease is more cost effective than the organic food at this point.
I know. And once you've got Alzheimer's, you're pretty expensive to take care of, and you're not having a good life. And if you had simply eaten organic for a long period of time, you might not have that Alzheimer's, and that would be so worth it. So it feels like you're spending too much on your food. And I know people like to get bargains, and they balk. They see the two things side by side. They look the same, they taste the same. And this is the really insidious thing about it. You can't taste the glyphosate. And you don't necessarily feel anything initially when you're exposed. You don't really notice that you're being poisoned. And so it's insidious and slow. And that's part of the issue too, that it doesn't bowl you over. Some of these toxic chemicals are so acutely toxic that you've been poisoned. But with glyphosate, it's very subtle, because it just goes in slowly and gets into these proteins and just causes a slow kill. It's a slow kill. But eventually you get to a point where some crisis happens, like, these proteins precipitating out. There's a lot of amyloidoses going on with respect to glyphosate. And that is really fascinating. I've been reading about all these proteins that have glycines that cause them to fold into an alpha helix. And the alpha helix goes into the membrane. It's really fascinating stuff. I'm learning so much biology. I have to say, I feel like I'm in school. Well,
I appreciate, one of the things I love about you is following you is you're from an esteemed university, and you're one of it seems like the rare ones that is allowed to talk about this. I don't know how you're staying safe. I'm glad you are staying safe. I'm glad you're employed and
yes.
You're able to do this, because what you're talking about, my wife and I constantly talk about and I know there's a case out there right now with someone who had cancer who they're now trying to prove in court that Monsanto was at the root of this cancer, glyphosate. And if this lawsuit goes through and is won, you start the implosion from inside of what this company has done. And you're one of the main ones in this group of just only a few people of scientists. We have us out here as practitioners and people who are so interested in the natural health world, but I can only talk so much science. Unlike you and your colleagues, you're breaking this open.
Yeah, and then people like you are really, really important. In fact, that's been a really wonderful audience for me. And I've given talks at alternative medicine communities, very well received. And I just love these people. They're so courageous. The people who are trying to find out how to fix these people, and the mainstream medicine has just totally failed. And the doctors don't seem to be willing to think outside the box because they need to really do something very different from what they're doing. It's not just you hand the person some prescription drug, it's going to fix their problem. You have to tell them, change to an organic diet, eat sulfur-containing foods, get sunlight exposure. I mean, that's another one that is a big beef of mine because people are so hung up on the sun causing cancer that they're much too careful about the sun, and they're ending up actually with sun deficiency, I would call it. The sunlight is really important for your health, and it can help you actually to fix your glyphosate problem because it can help you to renew your sulfate, and the sulfate can help you to fight back on the glyphosate contaminated proteins because you can break them down. The proteins that are contaminated with glyphosate build up as these misfolded proteins, and eventually they cause serious trouble. You need to be able to clear them, and you can't clear them if you don't have enough sulfate, and you need the sunlight to make the sulfate. So it's sort of very interesting that and when you put the sunscreen on, you're probably damaging the enzymes that make the sulfate with the sunscreen because the sunscreen often has aluminum in it.
You are a wealth of knowledge, ma'am. Well, I want to respect your time today, and I know you have to get back to amazing research, which you're doing every day. We really, really appreciate it in our world, and I thank you so much for being on the show today. And I'd love to have you back in the future as well on any updates. Where's a good place for people to follow what you're doing, the research, the work? Some of it is very intense scientific stuff, but if you just go through it, I was going through the PowerPoints here and there, and you really will learn a ton of stuff by doing it. Where can people find you, and where can people reach out and get information through you?
Yeah, I have a webpage at MIT, which is very dry, I have to admit. I haven't tried to make it fancy, but it's got a lot of stuff on it. All my papers on glyphosate are there. And those are a heavy read. Those are like scientific papers. But there's also, and I haven't posted everything, of course, on my webpage. I have a lot of interviews like this one and podcasts. I do a lot of radio podcasts, and you can find those, if you just search my name. My name, luckily, is pretty rare, Seneff. If you can learn that name and just do a Google search on it, you'll find all kinds of various interviews, and some of them are lighter than others. And I have slide presentations. I did a lot of presentations at Autism One, which are available online. And of course, those are often about autism. I have a lot of presentations. So there's various stuff, but my webpage is a place to start. I post most of my slideshows there, so you can get my the actual slides, and people. I would encourage people to repurpose them for anything that any talk they want to give, to just take my slides and turn them into their slides, because I think we need to get this message out. So it's and then I also have published a novel, which is called Cindy and Erica's Obsession to Solve Today's Healthcare Crisis, and it has a subtitle that's a bunch of diseases like autism and Alzheimer's. And that novel was fun, and I wrote that actually. I started writing it before I knew glyphosate, and I did it over the course of a year and a half. And in this last half year was when I came to realize about glyphosate. So the book is my own. It's sort of my own personal. It's a novel, but it's two mothers who are trying to figure out what's causing all the healthcare problems that we face, and and one of them is a pediatrician, and she has a child with autism. So it sort of works. It's kind of a fun story that I worked into it, and that's available on Amazon.
Wow. Well, I will post the links below this so that people can get that information if they don't have it already. And all I can say, ma'am, is you are a legend. You will go down as a legend because you were one of the ones that outed this whole situation, and you will be redeemed at the end. I guarantee that. I certainly hope that we can get glyphosate banned. I want it banned worldwide. That's my goal. And that's going to be a very ambitious goal, but that's what I want.
It needs to
I don't
disappear.
disagree. It needs to be done. So thank you so much, Say, for joining me. I really appreciate you, Dr. Stephanie Seneff. Thank you for being on Revolution Health, and I will be in touch with you again to do more information because you are phenomenal. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much.
All right, this is Revolution Health, Dr. Jason Dean. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the interview today with an amazing scientist, Dr. Stephanie Seneff. And follow the links below. We'll put those in there. And just make sure you follow her. She's doing an amazing job. She's literally changing the world. So signing off for Revolution Health, Dr. Jason Dean. We'll see you guys again in the near future. Bye-bye.